Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
हेलो 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 चेक 1 2 3 हेलो चेक 1 2 3 ठीक है ये हेलो 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 इस पे आ रही है ना ऑडियो देखिए आ रही है ये ठीक है हाँ बस जब कोई जुड़ेगा तो
Recording in progress.
A very good afternoon to all. उन्मेष के प्रथम दिवस के दूसरे सत्र में आप सबका स्वागत करते हैं। कृपया सब लोग अपना स्थान ग्रहण कर लें। आप सबसे निवेदन है, कृपया स्थान ग्रहण कर लें। अपने मोबाइल स्विच ऑफ या साइलेंट मोड पर कर लिए जाएं। आज के सत्र का विषय बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है और हम आप सबकी तवज्जो चाहते हैं। और इस सत्र का विषय है लैंगिक जागरूकता में साहित्य की भूमिका, द रोल ऑफ लिटरेचर इन प्रमोटिंग अवेयरनेस अबाउट जेंडर इश्यूज। और इस सत्र की अध्यक्षता कर रही हैं सी मृणालिनी। मैं एक एक करके अपने सभी विशेषज्ञों का, पैनलिस्ट का आपको परिचय दूंगी और एक एक करके आपको ससम्मान हम मंच पर आमंत्रित करेंगे। तो परिचय के बाद आप कृपया आएंगे और अपना आसन ग्रहण करेंगे। सबसे पहले सी मृणालिनी। सी मृणालिनी is a well-known Telugu writer. Some of her important publications are Telugu Pramukhula Chamatkar, Bhashanalu, Komali Gandharam, Pratidhwani and Nishabda Viplavalu. She has received several awards including the Vedagiri Purnachandra Rao Award, Vasi Reddy, Ranganayakamma Endowment Award, Yadanapudu Award, Kavitraye Award. She is the convener of Sahitya Academy's Telugu Advisory Board. I take this opportunity to invite you on stage, ma'am. Please come and take your place. और हमारे वक्ता गण में सबसे पहले मैं आवाज़ दूंगी श्री जतींद्र कुमार नायक। Let me introduce him. Jatindra Kumar Nayak is an eminent Odia English scholar and translator. He retired as Professor of English at Utkal University in 2016. His English translations of Odia novels have been published by University of California Press, Oxford University Press, and Penguin Books. He co-edited Critical Discourse in Odia with Animesh Mahapatra, published in 2022 by Taylor and Francis, UK. He is a recipient of the Katha Translation Award and the Hutch Crossword Book Award. जोरदार तालियों से हम सर का स्वागत करेंगे. And now I am going to invite K. Srilata K. She is a poet, fiction writer, translator, and academic. Her recent poetry collection, Three Women in a Single Room, House, was published by Sahitya Academy. Her novel, Table for Four, was longlisted for the Man Asian Literary Prize in 2009. Formerly a professor of literature at IIT Madras. She is currently an adjunct professor at Chennai Mathematical Institute. Ma'am, please come and take your place on. Already she is there. Thank you so much. और अभी हमारे नए अगले इस कड़ी में नई वक्ता हैं. अगली वक्ता हैं महुआ सेन जी. महुआ सेन is an eminent author, poet, and editor. She has published one poetry collection and co-authored more than 70 anthologies. She translated Raj Kamal Chaudhary's Hindi novella Machli Mari Hui into English. She is a recipient of the Real International Poetry Prize and the Poesis Award. ससम्मान आपको मंच पर आमंत्रित करती हूँ। और हमारे इस सत्र के अगले वक्ता हैं शिव कुमार राय। Shiv Kumar Rai is an eminent journalist, entrepreneur, author, TV anchor, and column writer. He is the founder and chairman of Fourth Voice Media Network and editor-in-chief of the Point Out Group. He has worked with Nav Bharat Times, Dainik Jagran, Zee News, Aaj Tak, and Doordarshan. He initiated the Meri Jati Bharatiya campaign and won the Bharatendu Harishchandra Award for the book of the same title. Thank you so much, sir. And now our last panelist of this session is Volga. Volga is a distinguished Telugu short story writer, critic, translator, and poet. Her notable books include Rajakiya Kathalu, political stories, Swecha, that's a novel, and Maku Godalu Levu, feminist thoughts, book of feminist thoughts, and Mahila Varanam, co-authored. The book is co-authored by her. She has also written screenplays for films and lyrics for dance, ballets. She received the Sahitya Academy Award for her short story collections, Vimukta. अभी हमारा मंच सज चुका है, सारे पैनलिस्ट विराजमान हो चुके हैं और मुझे लगता है आप सब भी आतुर हैं इस सत्र के सारे वक्तव्यों को सुनने के लिए। मुझे सिर्फ ये कहना है कि 1.5 घंटे का सत्र है हमारा और हमारे जितने स्पीकर्स हैं दे कैन डिवाइड द टाइम अमंग, आपस में आप बांट सकते हैं। आई थिंक 10 to 12 minutes. Each speaker will be provided 12 minutes. Try to sum up your speech within that time only. सबसे पहले I invite अध्यक्ष, हमारे यहाँ ये संस्कृति है कि अंत में बोलते हैं, तो मृणालिनी जी को हम बाद में बुलाएंगे। सबसे पहले परंपरा है हमारी, प्रायः मंच पर अध्यक्षीय जो भाषण है वो अंत में होता है और वो सबके वक्तव्य सुनने के बाद एक सम अप स्पीच होती है उनकी। तो सबसे पहले श्री जतेंद्र कुमार नायक जी को हम आमंत्रित करते हैं डायस पर आएँ और कृपया अपना वक्तव्य हमारे साथ शेयर करें।
Thank you, ma'am. I'll be very brief because brevity will help me conceal my ignorance. So I'll be very brief. I may not take 10 minutes. So this is a vast subject, and I lack the expertise or the erudition to do it justice. But this is also a very important subject, and it compels attention. We can never afford to ignore or overlook it. Gender justice is vitally important, and it has to be achieved if we want to call our social order civilized and just. Given my obvious limitations, I will confine myself to one area of knowledge, a field in literary studies which is increasingly gaining visibility: autobiographical writings by women. Needless to say, I'll confine myself to literature written in my own language, Odia, although I may from time to time refer to literature produced in neighboring states or other states in the country. A few years ago, I was associated with a project which involved the preparation of a bibliography of autobiographies in Odia. I found that in 2020, about 350 or 60 autobiographies had been published by 2020, not in 2020. Now the number must have exceeded 400 or 420, because every day an autobiography is being published. The first full-length autobiography came to be serialized in 1918 and was published in book form in 1927. Its author was an iconic novelist and man of letters, Fakir Mohan Senapati, about which I think some of you might have heard, who meant the narrative of his life to not only give an account of his eventful life, but also to bear witness to processes which transformed an almost stagnant, agrarian, custom-bound society and introduced generally disruptive and sometimes liberating forces of modernity. His example came to be followed by a few authors, but they were all men. Between 1918 and 2020, over about 100 years, only 15 or 20 autobiographies were written by women. Fragments of the stories of their lives were published in some literary journals. Major autobiographies written by women appeared on the literary landscape much later, in the 1970s. These were written by women who had taken part in the freedom struggle, gone to jail, and participated in the initiative to awaken women to the possibilities of the world around them. The scene has radically shifted in the intervening 50 years. Dozens of autobiographies written by women who are writers, professionals, educators, social activists have come out. New voices are heard, and new ways of looking and experiencing and interrogating and resisting the world are now presented or have been presented to readers who are accustomed to listening to only male voices in the past. Why did it take so long for women to set down the stories of their own lives? To claim a portion of the earth by portraying it from their distinctive points of view? The answer to this question may at first seem obvious. For a very long time, women were made to inhabit a world dominated by domesticity or defined by domesticity, excluded from the public sphere, and often denied opportunities to receive an education or receive formal education. The colonial encounter created a space, however narrow, however cramped, for some women in the upper reaches of society in cities like Calcutta and Bombay, where the British had established major modern cities. Reformists and liberals encouraged women in their families to become literate and educate themselves, maybe through informal means. The other turning point came with the freedom struggle in which women from upper and lower classes alike came to participate in fairly large numbers. Their engagement with a difficult and changing world compelled them to achieve a new identity through a new relationship with words. Because words now will be their only resources for writers. Words are the only resources, only weapons available to them. And many of them started recording their experiences through life narratives. There is another important reason for their choosing the form of autobiography as a medium of self-expression. Malavika Karlekar perceptibly observes that autobiographies expressing women's urge for self-expression suited them immensely because they didn't demand literary niceties like plot construction or having a point of view, all these literary niceties, character creation and all that. They could give themselves the impression they're simply recording their lives, which doesn't require any literary sophistication. The form of autobiography allowed them to overcome their cultural and social limitations. With the passage of time, they mastered these niceties and emerged as creative writers of great distinction. Many of them made a mark in the literary sphere as major writers. They didn't feel diffident as they used to feel earlier. But in the beginning, writing about their own lives allowed them to enter the public sphere and articulate views and record experiences that had escaped readerly attention or had been suppressed or erased in a world dominated by men. These represented acts of self-assertion and resistance, and also as ways of imagining alternative futures for women. So all that I wanted to submit is that autobiographies in the early stages, particularly in Odisha in the early 19th century and much later, provided women, like elsewhere, with the tools of asserting themselves, expressing themselves. Of course, in the beginning, the situation was far from ideal. A queen wrote an autobiography, the queen of a very oppressive king in Odisha, and defended her husband. And in the early 70s or 80s, a woman wrote an autobiography in which she was the wife of a vice chancellor, and when he became vice chancellor, we became vice chancellor. So you have many such autobiographies. No, not many, because not many came to be written, but the situation has changed, particularly after freedom fighters, women who are freedom fighters, women who are social activists, like Mahadevi, the daughter of the younger brother Madhusudan Das, the architect of modern Odisha, her daughter. Many women started writing about their experience of having gone to jails, participating in the freedom struggle, and suffering all sorts of hardships, and entering the public sphere. So the point I tried to make is that we have to look at women's autobiographical writings to see how consciousness of gender entered the literary sphere in a very significant and meaningful way. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Nayak, for your brief speech. And now I invite K. Srilata to share her viewpoint. K. Srilata. आप तालियां बजाकर करतल ध्वनि से हमारे सेशन का उत्साहवर्धन कर सकते हैं. के श्रीलता.
Thank you and good afternoon. That literature actively shapes society, that it does so by critiquing dominant narratives and by offering a space for women's narratives to flourish, is something I think all of us know by now. It's part of our common sense. We find that women's writing especially often offers a radically new aesthetic, an aesthetic which blurs the lines between literary texts on the one hand and social texts and critical practice on the other. My presentation today will reflect partly on what happens if, as a writer, as a woman writer in particular, you change the lens and place gender at the epicenter. And the questions that interest me particularly are, one, how does gender play out in literature when it is autobiographical? And how does it play out when it is seemingly removed from the self? And two, how might these two kinds of literatures raise awareness about gender? Because that's really the topic for the day. And I'm going to do what most poets usually do, which is I'm going to look at this question through the lens of two of my most recent poetry collections. The first being Three Women in a Single Room House, which was published by Sahitya Academy, and the other, Footnotes to the Mahabharata, which was published by Westland very recently. Let me begin by speaking about Three Women in a Single Room House, which is actually a collection of seemingly standalone poems, though actually I think even the most casual of readers will see quickly that the poems are connected, that they aren't as disjointed as they appear to be. The book contains, in large measure, the poetry of the self. I think Sri Jatindra Naik was also talking about narratives of the self, writing the self. So this is really the autobiographical canvas. So poetry is really an act of looking inwards, looking at the deep waters, if you like, which constitute the self, and trying your best not to drown in it, right? Not to get overwhelmed by it. At first, you don't see how deep those waters are and the many multitudes that it contains, to quote Whitman. But you begin to see it as soon as you step into it. You begin to see the layers peeling and how deep it is really, right? So you can actually spend an entire lifetime as a writer just reading the self, figuring out how you stand in relation to the world and how the world stands in relation to yourself. And here's the other thing which I've discovered. Though one may think of poetry that arises out of personal experience as perhaps very narrow, as it remains, it seems to be only about yourself, so what's the big deal? It's just autobiographical, is what many people say, right? But it isn't really the case, because those deep waters I spoke about also connect across people and so many others together in a web of interbeing, right? They're all swimming in those waters. So the self is really connected, and in that sense, autobiographical narratives are really not just that, right? So the act of writing poetry, especially poetry that touches one's own life, is, for many people I know, many women, cathartic, it's therapeutic, but I think it is so much more than just that. It's often dismissed as that, but it is much more so, much more than that. So for poetry really establishes connections between one person and the larger sea of humanity, of women, of men and women, and all beings really, right? So there is no escaping the deep waters of the self, nor should one want to escape from it. I think that's posturing if you want to really run away from it. If you're a woman writer concerned about how gender plays out, I would in fact say that it should be a large part of your writing. However that comes into your writing, it could be fictional writing. I know a lot of women writers especially hesitate to write memoirs because it gives away too much, and it hurts the people that they love maybe, and they're afraid, they're really afraid. But then, you find that they put autobiographical material together as fiction, right? So my own mother, the Tamil writer Vatsala, did that, chose to do that, right? But I think to put yourself, your experiential world as a woman into what you're writing is in itself a feminist act. And so the self, the experiential, has always been a part of my writing. It is like the little hill or the little rock that I stand on and look out at the world. And that's very clear when you look at the poems in Three Women. So I will read a little bit from it. And this book is really about, not just about the self, but also about intergenerational self. The self as is constructed through a lineage of women. So I'll read you the title poem. Three Women in a Single Room House. Not too small, not too big. This apartment with its balcony, on which our son can ride his tricycle, its kitchen with no walls, so we can cook and still belong to the rest of the house, is what I have sold my diamonds for, thinking over the agent's glibness of my grandmother who had bequeathed them to me. They had once shone talisman-like in the dark of that small room where we three lay, she, my mother, and I, on the floor in a row, three women used to small spaces. 2. My mother is sitting on the only bed in the only room in the house, writing something. When she's done, I find an ink stain on the sheets. One of them is an outstretched wing. 3. My grandmother is working her sewing machine in a corner of the only room in the house. She's making me a dress 2 sizes too large, so you can grow into it, she says. And when it is done, she says, go on, try it. It was never more than 7 steps from anywhere to the only window in the single-room house, and I would like to tell you that the sky floated in through the slats, filled us, my grandmother, my mother and I, with spaciousness. I would like to tell you that we learned to take up space. The truth is, we just grew used to small spaces, the three of us. Rough diamonds stuck in mines that ran too deep to catch the light. I turn now to my other recent work, which is also really a work of feminist inquiry, but one that shifts away from the field of the self to mythic women, women from the Mahabharata. Footnotes to the Mahabharata was published by Westland, as I said, very recently, and it follows the fault lines, cracks, and fissures in the Mahabharata canon, the Mahabharata corpus. What stood out for me were the stories of the women. Some of these, like Kuntis and Draupadis, had already been the subject of quirky and unorthodox tellings, and I have built on the foundations of these. To me, it's especially poignant that some of the poems on Kunti are based on Sri Bhairappa's Parva, and I know that he's no longer with us, right? So I'm thinking of some of these as a tribute to him also. Other poems such as Alli's, and the figure of Alli is peculiar to the Tamil Dravidian canon, right? So these women were marked by silences and gaps which served as the edifice for my poems. So the 5 poetic sequences which constitute footnotes to the Mahabharata explore the lives of Alli, of Hidimbi, Draupadi, Gandhari and Kunti. And I have deliberately chosen to open with Alli, who is a character, as I said, exclusive to the Tamil Dravidian tradition. Alli is followed by Hidimbi, who, with a few notable exceptions, despite the temple dedicated to her in Manali, has remained really a footnote in the larger narrative about the Pandavas. So I have experimented with a lot of forms in the work, and I'm not going to go into it because of the paucity of time, but I've used haiku, I've used senryu, I've used the haibun form, I've also used the dramatic monologue, where the Saki, the female listener, sits there and listens when the main character, it could be Ali or it could be Gandhari or Kunti, speaks her mind out. Right? So all of these poems are really constituted from retellings, existing retellings, including Pratibha Rai's retelling of various characters such as Draupadi and so on. So I was fascinated, for instance, by Pratibha Rai's portrayal of young Draupadi as a scholar poet, and wondered, where did all that disappear and why? Were the connections between Draupadi's life and the lives of women like myself less slender than they appeared? To me, it was clear immediately that there was no other perspective that interested me as much as that of the women in the Mahabharata, and the manner in which they related to the deeply flawed men in their lives, the heroes of the epic. With any story, real, imagined, or mythical, I always like to ask the question, what if those who are not the obvious stories were to tell the story? Obvious heroes were to tell the story. What sort of story would that be? So this is how the book has sort of come about. Not just that the women are unimportant, they are important, but some of the stories about them have slipped through the cracks. Draupadi, for instance, is a catalyst. She is believed to have caused the Great War, but we don't see so many aspects of her. We don't see what she was or who she was before she was married to the Pandavas. And Ali, of course, is not even there on the mainstream Sanskritic version. Hidimbi is a Rakshasi, and she's somebody who interested me hugely because she remains fairly marginal to the story. She isn't even seen as a proper woman. Her very humanness is in question. So I'll read maybe just a poem each from the Hidimbi, Draupadi, and Gandhari sequence, and I'll leave it at that because we don't really have much time. I don't want to. Hidimbi. They say that I give off a certain animal smell, that I'm too much, too loud, too dark, too muscular, too wanton, that I'm a sorceress and a thief, that if only I had thought to look in the mirror, I wouldn't have dreamt of a Kshatriya man, that a Rakshasi like me should know better, that good men should guard themselves against creatures like me, that trapped by the likes of us, they lose themselves. Palash flowers, biting my lips until they turn red. Palash flowers, biting my lips until they turn red. Here's another Hidimbi poem, Beloved. And this is really the scene where the Pandavas have to leave the forest and travel on, and they leave Hidimbi behind, right? Beloved. Much was said on the morning they left. We can't possibly take her with us. It's unthinkable, Bhima, be reasonable. Son, your time with her was borrowed time. In time, there will be other women. You can always visit her when the fancy takes you. She will soon be a distant memory, take my word for it. A warrior must know when to move on. Don't be such a crybaby. But she is with child. Mother knows she is. She served as well. She wasn't bad for a Rakshasi. May you be blessed with a son, Hidimbi. On the morning they left, much was said, but I had ears only for that one word of Bhima's, beloved. Through my heart bird, the arrow of that word. Through my heart bird, the arrow of that word. I'll conclude with a short poem based on Draupadi. And this is really, as I said, the Draupadi before she was married to the Pandavas, Draupadi, the young poet, scholar, whom we somehow forget or leave behind. So this is her mother speaking to her, Queen Prishati speaking to Draupadi. Says Queen Prishati to Draupadi, put away your quill. Put away that parchment, put away your quill. Scriptures and poems are of no use to women. Cast aside your coarse garments, drape yourself in these silks, softer than deerskin. Try on these pearls, more lustrous than the moon. Put away that parchment, put away your quill. Mark my words, daughter, you won't go far with this life of the mind. Thank you.
थैंक यू मैम फॉर योर विजनरी वर्ड्स। और इसी कड़ी में हमारी अगली वक्ता हैं महुआ सेन जी। लैंगिक जागरूकता में साहित्य की भूमिका, इस विषय पर हम युवा विचारों को भी सुनना चाहेंगे। और मैं समझ रही हूँ कि बहुत ही आज का जो सेशन है गंभीर विषय है, तो लगता है आप तालियां बजाना भी भूल रहे हैं। तो करतल ध्वनि होती रहे तो सत्र में जीवंतता बनी रहती है। सो यू ऑल प्लीज़ गिव योर अपलॉज, और हमारे जो वक्ता हैं उनका भी हौसला अफजाई हो और सत्र हमारा बहुत जीवंत बना रहे। महुआ जी कम।
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thanks to Sahitya Academy for bringing all of us together under the same roof yet again. And literature, we know literature is the pulse of our, society. It is our memories written down. And when we talk of gender, the representation, yeah? Okay. I'm audible, right? And when we talk of gender, representation, equality, identity, rights, literature plays not as a bystander, it plays as a witness. And many a times it plays as a guardian. It plays as a mentor, almost, whispering that things do not need to be like this, yeah? And literature has always done two things. First, it reflects. It acts as a mirror. And it, reflects the prejudices, the hierarchies, the cacophony, the silence of the society. And secondly, it illuminates. It acts as a lamp. M.H. Abrams had said this. And it, shows that it opens a trapdoor to many questions. It shows us new possibilities. It gives us hope. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches on the soul and sings its tune without the words. Emily Dickinson reminds us, and literature does exactly this. And again, when we talk of gender, literature serves both the purposes. It acts as a lamp, it acts as a mirror. Somebody rightly said right now, Draupadi. We remember when we read Draupadi being dragged into the hall of men, dragged by her hair, we see, a literature as a mirror. It reflects patriarchy at its worst. And when the same Draupadi raises her voice, questions, dharma itself, we see the lamp, Yeah, and Draupadi's courage transcends centuries. And I'll pause here because it's not ever about the past. It's always about, literature is always about the dialogue with the present, yeah? I mean, when we talk about, gender fluidity, our ancient texts are replete with gender fluidity. Take, for example, Ardhanarishwar. I think that's the best example of androgyny and fluidity. Shiva, Parvati, one body, man, women, reason, intuition, creation, destruction. And even Vishnu as Mohini, who seduces the demons and, again unites with Shiva. So all these things, and here gender is not opposition, it's complementarity, yeah? And literature, when retells these stories, we were talking about retelling literature, and we have Volga here who has retold the story of Sita. When we retell these stories, we reimagine, and we, look at people in a very different way. We look at our neighbor, our sons, our daughters, our friends in a very different way, more tenderly, of course, because we tap into the skin of another and then we feel the feelings of another. So it makes us a better human being. It changes the entire dynamic. And of course, this is not only limited to our ancient texts. Authors have always been very vocal about talking about gender issues, gender fluidity. And I'll start with Ismat Chughai's Lihaf, the first ever book, I mean the short story that was written on same-sex desire. And I cannot not mention Machli Mari Hui by Raj Kamal Chaudhary, which has been translated into English as The Dead Fish and published by Rupa. It has been translated by yours truly. And the book talks about, and is the first ever novel written in Hindi literature on lesbian identity. And at a time when even acknowledging something like that was, blasphemous, so to say. So here we talk about, in The Dead Fish, we talk about how Shirin or, Priya, they are, the lesbian characters, almost gasps for breath in the air, metaphorically, of course, poisoned by societal pressure, societal prejudices, and all of that. And then we have Amrita Pritam's Pinjar, and Puro's scarred body tells us that, partition violence was never gender neutral. It inscribed more cruelly on women. And then very recently I've read Remains of the Body by Saikat Majumdar, who talks about, the protagonist is Kaustav, and he's drawn towards both man and women, and makes us, it kind of compels us to think about heteronormativity and how this, I would say insane, standards or binaries kind of, stifles the voices of so many. Yeah, and somebody was talking about, Sir was talking about autobiography, and I recently read P. Vaishali's autobiography, and she writes about her identity, lesbian identity, and her life living with dyslexia. So, of course, when we read these stories, something inside of us shifts, right? So that is what literature does to us, yeah? And of course, when we hear, if we talk about world literature, we have read Giovanni's Room, where Giovanni is the character who deals with same-sex desire, males' homosexuality. Or we have read Orlando, who transcends centuries, dawdling between man and woman, and reminds us that gender is never fixed; it's fluid. Yeah, or if we talk about the wave of feminism, especially the second wave of feminism, here we have professors of literature. They would be able to tell you more refined way. So the second wave of literature gave birth to, feminism gave birth to literature that almost argued for gender normativity. Yeah, and we have Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, which kind of dismantled the entire idea of a woman who was apparently meant only for domesticity and motherhood and so on. So this kind of brought about a revolution of, women liberation movement all across Europe and UK. So this is what literature does. It not only, evokes emotions and empathy, it also plants a seed of, restlessness. And that restlessness gives birth to transformation by virtue of movement and revolution, because we know, because literature teaches us that you do not have to, live with injustice. It reminds us to speak up. Yeah, and we have Lakshmi Puri ji right here, I can see. So I cannot not mention her amazing novel, Swallowing the Sun. And she talks about Malati, who transcends many, Lakshman Rekhas. It was set against 1930s, right? 1930s and 40s. And she transcends many Lakshman Rekhas to kind of reach for the sun, or metaphorically to swallow the sun. So when you read all these things, it, of course, inspires us to do, and it, of course, I know I'm perhaps, exhausted my time, so I'll leave you all with an image. So literature is just like a river, and it reflects the sky above, which is the society, the world as it is. And many a times, this river, takes different courses, it changes channels, and it changes the land it flows through. And gender studies, gender issues, or any question related to gender are the pebbles dropped into this river. And that creates lots of ripples that goes far beyond our sight. And each ripple has the potential to create, develop, and implement a system of change. So we should always remember to keep dropping these pebbles into the river, because the river carries with it the seeds of transformation. So the literature, of course, is the lamp that keeps burning so that silence do not devour our stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mahua Sen, for your viewpoint. And now Mr. Shiv Kumar Rai is the next speaker. Sir, please come to share your opinion.
नमस्कार। सबसे पहले साहित्य अकादमी को उन्मेष का ये तृतीय संस्करण आयोजन करने के लिए बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं, बधाई। The role of literature in promoting awareness about gender issues. हम सौभाग्यशाली हैं कि हमारा जन्म उस पावन धारा में हुआ है जहाँ की माटी में साहित्य के बीज प्रस्फुटित हुए, साहित्य का सृजन हुआ। वेद मानव इतिहास के सबसे पहले साहित्यिक दस्तावेज हैं। प्राचीन सदियों में पहले इन्हें मौखिक परंपरा के रूप में एक पीढ़ी से दूसरी पीढ़ी तक हस्तांतरित होते देखा गया, लेकिन इस अनमोल विरासत को भारत के कई क्षेत्रों में पांडुलिपियों के रूप में संरक्षित भी किया गया। भारत में वेदों की मौखिक परंपरा, जिन्हें श्रुति साहित्य के तौर पर भी जाना जाता है, को यूनेस्को ने मानवता की मौखिक और अमूर्त विरासत की श्रेष्ठ कृति के रूप में घोषित किया था। वैदिक काल में साहित्य के इन पद चिन्हों पर चलकर ही मानव जाति ने सभ्यता की ओर कदम बढ़ाया। ऋग्वैदिक काल में महिलाओं की स्थिति उच्च और सम्मानजनक थी और उन्हें शिक्षा का भी समान अवसर था। तमाम धार्मिक और जो सामाजिक आयोजन थे उसमें उनकी भागीदारी थी। लेकिन उत्तर वैदिक काल में धीरे धीरे इस स्थिति में गिरावट देखी गई। As we all know, sex usually refers to a person's biological characteristics, whereas gender refers to socially constructed roles and norms. Socially constructed roles and norms, सामाजिक रूप से निर्मित भूमिकाएं और मानदंड। और अब सवाल यह उठता है कि सामाजिक भूमिकाएं और मानदंड जब समाज ही तय करता है तो फिर समाज में जेंडर इनइक्वलिटी क्यों है? आखिर ऐसी कौन सी प्रथाएं हैं जो असमानता समाज में लेकर आती हैं, जेंडर इक्वलिटी को बढ़ाती हैं? मैं पत्रकार और एंटरप्रेन्योर के साथ साथ एक समाजशास्त्र का विद्यार्थी भी हूं। हमने पढ़ा कि कोई भी प्रथा किस तरह से रूप में आती है, जिसे हम कहते हैं कस्टम्स है। हमारे गांव में दादा दादी इसको मानते हैं, सब कहते आए हैं तो हमको भी मानना है। तो कस्टम्स बनता कैसे है कि जब कोई भी छोटा सा विचार, कोई चीज़ हो सकता है उसमें हमारी कोई संकुचित सोच हो, हमारा एक अपना स्वार्थ हो, हमने उसे अपनाया, कुछ और लोगों ने उसे अपनाना शुरू किया, फिर धीरे धीरे समाज में वो एक कस्टम का रूप ले लेती है और फिर हम उसको बिना किसी सोच के, बिना बुद्धि का प्रयोग किए हुए उसको हम मानने लगते हैं। ऐसे ही कुछ लोक मान्यताओं और प्रथाओं पर अगर हम गौर करें तो समाज में अगर हम महिलाओं की स्थितियों की बात करें, बेटियों की स्थिति बात करें, तो बेटियों को बेटियां पराया धन हैं, या फिर माँ के घर से डोली उठ गई और अब पति के घर से ही उसकी अर्थी उठेगी। बेटी की कमाई कौन खाता है? बेटा अंतिम संस्कार करेगा तो हमें मोक्ष मिलेगा, और बेटियां अगर अंतिम संस्कार करेंगी तो हमें मोक्ष नहीं मिलेगा। इन रूढ़िवादी प्रथाओं की वजह से जेंडर इनइक्वलिटी का सबसे बड़ा शिकार देश की अबोध बालिकाएं से लेकर महिलाओं को होना पड़ा। 70-80 के दशक में अगर कोई बेटी पढ़ लिख कर कोई नौकरी कर रही है और अगर वह अविवाहित है तो समाज में कुछ लोग यह भी कहते थे कि देखो बेटी की कमाई खा रहे हैं। अगर बेटी की आयु 18 या 20 साल से अधिक हो गई तो माता पिता या आस पड़ोस और रिश्तेदारों से यह ताना सुनने को भी मिलता था कि बेटी बूढ़ी हो जाएगी, उसके हाथ कब पीले करोगे। उत्तर भारत के कई राज्यों में, विशेष तौर से ग्रामीण इलाकों में, लड़कियों की शिक्षा का मतलब छोटा मोटा हिसाब किताब या फिर चिट्ठी पढ़ लेना होता था। तब व्हाट्सएप नहीं चलते थे। सामाजिक रीति रिवाज और परंपराएं कई बार सामाजिक अव्यवस्थाओं का रूप धारण कर लेती हैं। 1993 में पीएचडी के शोध कार्य के लिए मैंने मध्य प्रदेश की राजधानी भोपाल में समाजशास्त्रीय अध्ययन किया आत्महत्याओं के ऊपर। सुसाइड इन भोपाल सिटी, इट वाज द फर्स्ट सोशियोलॉजिकल स्टडी इन मध्य प्रदेश। उस वक्त मुझे कई लोगों ने बोला कि आत्महत्या पे आप समाजशास्त्रीय अध्ययन कर रहे हैं, ये तो बेसिकली एक इट्स अ साइकोलॉजिकल इशू। सच है बिल्कुल, दिस इज अ साइकोलॉजिकल एंड बायोलॉजिकल फिनोमेना, बट द फोर्सेस विच कंपेल पीपल टू कमिट सुसाइड, दैट इज सोशियोलॉजिकल। हमारा मनोविज्ञान बन कैसे रहा है? समाजशास्त्री कारणों की वजह से। और इसमें सबसे बड़ी जो भूमिका होती है वो हमारे साहित्य की होती है। हम बचपन में अपने पिताजी के मुंह से हमेशा सुना करते थे, साहित्य वह जिसमें समाज का हित हो। समाज में जेंडर इनइक्वलिटी को एक अलग उदाहरण प्रख्यात साहित्यकार महाश्वेता देवी की 1987 में लिखी एक लघु कथा स्तनदाता से का मैं जिक्र करना चाहूँगा। इस कहानी में उन्होंने आर्थिक रूप से कमज़ोर ब्राह्मण महिला का उल्लेख किया जो एक अमीर जमींदार परिवार के बच्चों को ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग के लिए वहाँ पे उनके घर जाती थी। इस कहानी में बताया गया कि ज़मींदार परिवार की बहुएं अपने बच्चों को ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग यानी स्तनपान नहीं कराती, क्योंकि उन्हें लगता है कि ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग से उनकी फिटनेस बिगड़ जाएगी। हमारी परिचर्चा इस वक्त जिस सभागार में हो रही है उसका नाम अक्क महादेवी है। 12वीं शताब्दी में कन्नड़ साहित्य की प्रतिष्ठित कवयित्री, संत और वीर शैव आंदोलन की प्रमुख सदस्य थीं अक्क महादेवी, जिन्होंने भगवान शिव के प्रति अपनी गहरी भक्ति को 400 से 30 से अधिक वचनों के माध्यम से व्यक्त किया। उनके वचन कन्नड़ भक्ति कविता में एक महत्वपूर्ण योगदान है। कन्नड़ में अक्क का अर्थ बड़ी बहन है। अक्क महादेवी आध्यात्मिक और नारीवादी शक्ति का प्रतीक हैं, जिन्होंने सामाजिक मानदंडों को चुनौती दी थी। अब बात साहित्य सृजन की, जिस सृजन में समाज का हित समाहित है। जेंडर इक्विटी को लेकर अगर हम मौजूदा समय की बात करें तो समाज में कुछ सकारात्मक परिवर्तन आए हैं, और इसमें एक बड़ी भूमिका साहित्य सृजन की भी है, जिसने समाज में एक जागरूकता लेकर आए। आज समूचे राष्ट्र में हम देख रहे हैं कि बेटियां किस तरह से आगे हो रही हैं, और हर क्षेत्र में, चाहे वो अंतरिक्ष हो, खेल का मैदान हो, विज्ञान का क्षेत्र हो या प्रशासन और पुलिस की भूमिका हो, बेटियां हर क्षेत्र में आगे आ रही हैं। तो ये समाज में जो एक सकारात्मक माहौल बनता है, ये माहौल बनने में जो साहित्य और सृजन से जुड़े लोग हैं उनकी एक अहम भूमिका होती है। आज शहरों में ही नहीं, ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में भी बेटियां पढ़ लिख कर समाज और राष्ट्र में अपना योगदान दे रही हैं। माँ या पिता के नहीं रहने पर आज बेटियां उनका अंतिम संस्कार भी कर रही हैं। बेटी की कमाई जैसी सोच में धीरे धीरे ही सही सकारात्मक बदलाव देखने को मिल रहा है। मेरा हमेशा से मानना रहा है कि संवेदनशीलता के बिना हम साहित्य का सृजन नहीं कर सकते। साहित्य जगत से जुड़े लोगों को अपने सृजन से समाज में भी संवेदनशीलता का पाठ पढ़ाना होगा। संवेदनशीलता समाज में लैंगिक असमानता के लिए, संवेदनशील समाज में लैंगिक असमानता के लिए कोई स्थान नहीं है, और इसमें साहित्य जगत से जुड़े लोगों की भूमिका और अधिक बढ़ जाती है। उन्मेष का यह आयोजन बिहार की धरती पर हो रहा है, जहाँ के एक जाने माने कवि रामधारी सिंह दिनकर की इन पंक्तियों के साथ मैं अपनी बात समाप्त करना चाहूँगा कि छीनता हो सत्व कोई, छीनता हो सत्व कोई और तू त्याग तप से काम ले, छीनता हो सत्व कोई और तू त्याग तप से काम ले, यह पाप है, यह पाप है, पुण्य है विछिन्न कर दे, बढ़ रहा तेरी तरफ जो हाथ है। तो लैंगिक असमानता को दूर करने के लिए या समाज में भेदभाव को समाप्त करने के लिए हम लोगों को स्वयं भी आगे आना होगा। धन्यवाद।
आभार मिस्टर शिव कुमार राय आपके अर्थपूर्ण वक्तव्य के लिए। और अध्यक्षीय वक्तव्य से पहले अब इस सत्र की अंतिम वक्ता वोल्गा को आमंत्रित करती हूँ। मैम, प्लीज कम टू डिलीवर योर स्पीच।
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think I spent 50 years of my life for this title. Writing literature in promoting awareness about gender issues. And today I will start with a small joke that happened here. Myself and Mrunalini are talking. If we stand behind the podium, we may not be visible. Then the organizer told, always this is the problem with females. And I am aghast because to stop these kind of remarks, I worked for 50 years, and after 50 years, when I was the speaker, the same remark came up to me. So Mehua Sen clearly told about literature and how it reflects various problems and all that, so I won't touch that. If we come to the gender issues, the word gender is a more recent one. Understanding gender as a social construction is a very recent phenomena. Whereas women entered into the area of literature about 200 years back. Until the colonial rule established strongly in India, women were not seen as a point of discussion. Women were prescribed, the roles and duties, responsibilities of women were prescribed strictly and followed strictly. Any aberrations were punishable and punishments were severe. But for the colonial rulers, some rules and regulations in the name of traditions like sati, child marriage, not allowing widow remarriage were seemed to be uncivilized. Anyhow, colonizers want to name colonized as uncivilized, and the position of women in India gave them a good cause or reason. That is how women's problems or women's question came into agenda. So for the first time in the later part of 18th century and first half of the 19th century, women became a problem or a question for the ruler and the ruled. To solve the problem or answer the question, reform movements began to rise in every state. The age of consent question in Phulmani's case in Bengal, Rukmabai's case about child marriage in Maharashtra were discussed widely. And Savitribai Phule were working for women's education and widow remarriage. Writers like Tarabai Shinde, Pandita Ramabai were writing about the sexual discriminations. Traditionalists and reformers debate these issues ferociously in the whole 19th century. At that time, in Andhra Pradesh, in Andhra, came Kandukuri Veeresalingam and Rajyalakshmi began their relentless work for women's education and widow remarriage. Veeresalingam used literature as a powerful weapon for his reform movement. He was a leader, an activist, and a writer working in many fronts. His novel Rajasekhara Charitra and another novel Satyaraja Apurva Yatralu humorously questioned gender roles. Then came Gurazada, a playwright, poet, and short story writer. His concentration was on child marriage. His play Kanyasulkam and his poem Purnama Katha dealt with child marriage. He was very angry that the British government brought the Widow Remarriage Act and postponing and delaying the Child Marriage Act. Anyhow, in his play, Gurazada effectively and sarcastically commented on this issue. All protagonists in his literature were women opposing male domination in a powerful way. The first and foremost writer in Telugu who wrote clearly about gender roles, women's sexuality, motherhood, and gender division of labor was Chellam. In his analytical books 3, he clearly spoke about almost all the issues that today's feminist writers are speaking and writing. His novels, short stories, essays, and musings were like wildfire. Chellam's literature influenced immensely. A lot of discussions were happened around women's questions. Though Chellam almost defined the gender construction and gender roles, the society then was not ready to understand gender as a social construction. Then women writers were writing about women's writers, including political rights like universal franchise. Kanupatti Varalakshmamma was one of the important women writers of the pre-independence times in Telugu, who wrote many stories and influenced the national movement too. Writers also discussed the Hindu Code Bill from pre-independence days. When Rao Committee was active in surveying people's opinion and preparing the Hindu Code Bill, major writers of Telugu divided into two groups. pro-Hindu Code Bill writers and anti-Hindu Code Bill writers. Chellam wrote stories and plays supporting women's rights for separation from the marriage, mother's right on children, adoption rights and property rights. Writers like Viswanatha Satyanarayana, Adavi Bapiraju opposed the proposal of Hindu Code Bill. These writings played a major role in creating an atmosphere among educated people who wrote and signed supporting the Hindu Code Bill. After independence, with equal right to vote and with a constitution promising gender equality, women writers began to write with many hopes and aspirations. Though Gopi Chand and Kodavatiganti Kutumbarao writing about the drudgery of a housewife and mother with Marxist point of view, common women were waiting for women writers to write from their own experiences. That place of a women teacher or advisor, whatever you call, was awaited by women and was taken by a women writer, Malati Chandur. Malati Chandur from the first half of 1950s, 1953 to be precise, occupied a considerable space in a very popular Telugu family magazine called Andhra Prabha. She was given a column of question and answers. Both men and women readers followed that column like a thriller serial because they are asking questions about the small and big problems of their lives. Every week she was writing about some problem or other, a short essay. She also introduced world literature in a simple and brief format to the newly educated young women. Women in those days were eagerly consumed the Pramadavanam, that is question and answers, and these short introductions of the world writers like Somerset Maugham, Pearls Burke, Agatha Christie, Jane Austen, Emily Bronte and others. The 60th decade was women's decade in Telugu literature. The women writers like Lata, Ranganayakamma, Vasireddy Sita Devi, Dvivedula Visalakshi started writing about women's sexuality, domestic violence and political rights. On one side, Yaddanapudi Silochana Rani and Koduru Kausalya Devi were preparing new readers with a wonderful readable novels of them. Though they were romantic novels, though romantic, the women protagonists of Silochana Rani were educated, employed, with a lot of self-respect, finding and defending their place in larger society. And Vasireddy Sita Devi, Abburi Chaya Devi, their stories and novels influenced the society, and awareness was spreading like anything in the middle class educated women. Not knowing that they were preparing the ground for much more bigger agenda, women writers went on writing. The role of women writers in making literature as a powerful tool in putting the gender issues in a much larger area is immeasurable and priceless in Telugu literature. They prepared women for a movement which was going to ask questions on gender issues in a highly political tone. Women's movement in 1970s drew lot of strength from women's literature in doing campaigns against domestic violence, dowry deaths, rape, and questions about women's health. Literature prepared new definition of women as agents of change rather than mere victims. Women as agents of change rather than mere victims. Through women's movement, women's literature easily understood and identified with the radical statements like personal is political. In this highly volatile atmosphere, UN declared in 1975 as an International Women's Year and asked for a country report. India's report on the status of women in India, titled Towards Equality, was an eye-opener and path-breaking because women's status by then was highly declined. Mortality rate, health, economic status, political status, every aspect of women's position was declined. As the year 1975 was also a year when emergency was imposed, lot of censorship was happened on the press that gave considerable space to discuss about gender issues in newspapers and magazines. Women wrote many articles, stories, both true and fiction, and lot of discussions and debates happened throughout this period. Middle class women accessed that information and new awareness was spreading among them. All this lead to feminist writing. From 1980s, women writers wrote and put new issues for discussion. They wrote about their bodies, about their sexuality, motherhood, and labor. Feminist literature and women's movement both joined together and put slogans like women's rights are human rights. In Telugu, number of women writers, including me, began writing with a gender perspective. Poets like Jayaprabha, Kondepudi Nirmala, Ghantasala Nirmala, Patibandla Rajani, Sila Lolita were the first voices to be heard. P. Satyavati, Vadrevu Veeralakshmi, Kuppili Padma, Pratima and many others wrote short stories with women's perspective. Mrunalini, who is here, Mrunalini and Vasant Kannabiran wrote columns in popular newspapers which attracted middle class women who are ready to be sensitized on gender issues. Slowly, gender perspective throw light on many issues like globalization, caste, race, religion, and environment. Now, for understanding every aspect of human life and the whole ecosystem, looking through a gender lens is a must. So, look the world through women's eyes. If you look the world through women's eyes, you understand the problem was not with women or female. The problem was with the social construction of gender, these constructions of buildings, furniture, everything which were meant only to men.
थैंक यू वोल्गा फॉर योर विजनरी प्रेजेंटेशन। आप सभी बुद्धिजीवियों ने अपने वक्तव्यों में अनेक दृष्टांतों के माध्यम से इस बेहद गंभीर विषय का मंथन किया और अब अध्यक्षीय वक्तव्य सत्र को पूर्णता प्रदान करेगा। सो आई हैंड ओवर द सेशन टू द ऑनरेबल चेयर मृणालिनी जी। इट्स टाइम टू हियर फ्रॉम यू।
Thank you very much. I thought the Adhyaksha would usually start the meeting, but I was told that I should speak at the end. Doesn't matter. Der hai but durust hai. So anyway, you heard all the 5 speakers. You can see how varied people can be. Not one paper resembled the other paper. All the presentations were totally different from each other. All were pertinent to the subject, but all had different takes on the topic you are seeing there. So this variety comes because literature is such a vast subject and society is such a vast subject that interrelation between them, interaction between them is something that every person has his own take on. So we have 3 points I think we have noticed. Literature mirrors society, as Mahua said, or literature reflects society. That's one angle. Secondly, what does literature do? It is actually 3-phase thing. One is it reflects. Second thing, it critiques society. It does not simply reflect a society. Literature does not do that. If it is simply reflecting a society, it will be a newspaper report. It's not literature. Literature critiques society at the second stage. And at the third stage, as Oscar Wilde said, literature anticipates life. He said anticipates life. I am saying literature anticipates society. So literature has, like we call kavayaha kranta darshanaha. You see, we say that the poet visualizes much more than what is exactly happening now. He can look into the future. He's a visionary. So we have 3 types of way you can look into any subject you can take and you can put it in this formula of whether it reflects or whether it is critiquing or whether it is anticipating. So if once we start thinking of these 3 things, what is happening in each literature in India, I think that would have been given us a more comprehensive picture of what has happened. But each of them had a different thing. First of all, I was surprised to see that 2 people were talking about women writing. not others writing, women writing about themselves, autobiographies, like Nayakji was saying, only when women start writing by themselves, about themselves, then only the awareness can come. He's very right in what he said. Second paper was by Srilata. Srilata was also saying, quoting from her own poetry, she was saying that even if a poet is subjective, the poet, she is speaking in her tone, but actually she represents the multitude. So her voice reflects the agony of a lot of people, many. That way also, through you can spread the awareness with your own feelings. And Mahuva gave a very vibrant picture of the subject. She gave a very comprehensive understanding of the topic. And when we go back to why this disparity was there, what was society doing, why was there this, why is there a need for gender awareness? I think Shivkumar was talking about why we had needed this sort of literature because of the society, how the society has developed, how it was, and how it is now. He has talked more about the historical issue. And then we have Olga, who gave a totally comprehensive picture of what happened in Telugu. From 19th century, late 18th century to this time, she has given a comprehensive picture of one language, in her language, what's happening. So here I have a few more questions also, things also I would like to add. Does it mean that if we want gender awareness to be spread, does it mean that people have to write their own stories? Should only women have the responsibility of spreading awareness? So two papers almost said that. But is it necessary? But Olga's paper defied it. She said it was men who were writing about women. They were spreading gender awareness. So it's not necessary that only women have to write about themselves to spread gender awareness in the society. Others also can do that. Similarly, how do you anticipate? How do you anticipate it? Gurizada Apparao, whom Olga was mentioning actually, he said as early as in the early 1900s, he said, women of this country will rewrite history. At that point of time, no woman was capable of rewriting history. Where was he looking? What did he see? He knew nothing. Nothing happened at that time. But he was such a visionary that we know that women have rewritten history now. So that is that drashta. That is what I'm saying. It need not be that I have to write about myself. Only then you will get the thing. I mean, you will get the meaning of my life. Or only then you will understand what the gender discrimination is. Not necessarily. Others also can write, should write, they have written also. Initial stages, they were the ones who wrote. That point was very well brought up by Olga also. And then you have, if I write only about myself, my life, everything is subjective, it's autobiographical, will then only, is it the responsibility of a writer only to share his own experiences? Can't you write about a life that is not yours? That is where real gender awareness can spread. That's my point. If I write about myself, naturally you'll have some empathy for me, sympathy for me then. But what a writer does is, writer needs to have empathy, not sympathy. This sort of empathy is possible only when a writer can look into the lives of others and engage with them and actually identify with them. That may not be his experience, but he can understand that experience. Unless that empathy enters into literature, nothing, no sort of awareness can it get. It can never be a critique, or it can never anticipate life. She was mentioning Vishwanath Satyanarayana just now, Olga. I would like to mention one of his stories. In 1950s, he was our first Jnanapith awardee, Vishwanatha. He wrote in one story about gay relationship. He doesn't specifically call it gay relationship. He only simply hints at it, that this also may happen. This also can happen. There can be such a relationship. Idi inkoka vidhamu. That is the title of the story. So he wrote this story at the time of 1950s, when you know that even in US, nobody had come out in that sense. Nobody had come out. No gay person had come out in that sense, even in America. At that point of time, a very, very orthodox Telugu writer anticipated that this also can happen. A gay relationship also is possible in this world. How did he anticipate it? Like Gurizada, Vishwanatha was also in some sense, though usually he's brushed away as an actually orthodox writer and a regressive writer, he could anticipate that this can happen in this society. So it is when a writer can have empathy with the person, a writer who has a vision that is beyond all others' visions, then that becomes great literature. Otherwise, it's good literature. So we do have a lot of great writers in India, not just in Telugu. I am quoting Telugu because that's my language, but even in other languages you can see. Somebody was mentioning Fakir Mohan Setupati. Yes, Tagore. Tagore was also visionary in that sense. These people anticipated what's going to happen in the world. So, to spread awareness of anything, you can look at the other. Who are called me and the other? This me and the other is something that has become a maxim in today's literature, critical theory. The other, all the time. That sort of, the otherness should totally disappear from literature. That is what writers should do. There should not be any reference to the other hereafter in literature. Everybody is us and we. We are all here. And I can also mention one Telugu writer who lives in US. She is not a lesbian, but she wrote the stories about lesbians. She's Rentala Kalpana. She writes beyond her experience. How is she able to write beyond her experience, something that is not in her life? That is because of this particular empathy I'm talking about. You see, when something like that comes through literature, something that is propagated through that sort of literature, we do realize, we do become aware of there is so much in life. There is so much depth in life. There is so much happiness in life. There is so much loneliness in life. There is so much variety in life. And everybody, we are all the same, more or less, in what we are doing. We will no longer need any theories or texts or speeches on spreading awareness. By this time, we should have reached that stage when we no longer think of discriminations, what literature actually kept on talking about. It doesn't like hegemonies, it doesn't like hierarchies. Literature has been questioning all these things. But literature, there should come a day, which hopefully it is quite close, when we don't have to think about, since we are talking only about gender, we can also talk about other things like class. But here it's only confined to gender. So initially I thought people were talking only about women. That was the gender. But Mahuva actually put it on track when she included LGBT community in her speech. So all these are included in gender, and they should be, what the literature should be doing is showing us that all are equal. People are different, that's all. If we simply understand that I am not like you, you are not like me, it doesn't matter, we are all living together, we are all happy together, that's how it should be. I can understand you, I can sympathize with you, I can empathize with you, you should do the same, and everybody is happy in this whole beautiful world and in the only life we have. So that is the sort of understanding real good literature can give us. And literature definitely anticipates life. I'm sure, Oscar Wilde was very true in saying that we have to think about historically and try to fish out all those opinions and examples that our earlier writers have given, and we can make a good case out of it. I'm very happy that such an important issue has been taken up in this conference, and I'm happy that I've been given at least 10 minutes to say what I wanted to say. Thank you, one and all. I congratulate all my speakers who've done a very good job. Thank you all.
We have still 5 to 10 minutes in hand. If you have any question, anything in your mind, so audience, I welcome your questions. We can take 1 or 2 questions. No question? Actually, the topic was very well discussed and expressed, so everything is clear in your mind. Our writers, you have a question? Please. Please, Mike, we don't have. Please go ahead. We don't have the. Don't.
Yeah, I think a lot of work has been happening regarding this field. I think you missed my talk. I was talking about Remains of the Body by Saikat Majumdar. And he throws a light on Kaustav, who is drawn towards man and woman both. So it kind of, forces us to think about heteronormativity, right? I think a lot of literature, especially last 5 years, we can, get to see, which talks about not only feminine literature in terms of feminine literature, but, across queer literature, if you talk about. Right now, I mean, a few months back, I have translated Rajkamal Chaudhary's magnum opus, The Dead Fish, which talks of Machli Mari Hui, into English. The Dead Fish, which talks about lesbian, same-sex desire. So yes, a lot of work has been happening of late, I guess. Yes.
Thank you, Mawa. Any other question? Okay, I think now we should sum up the. Please, please.
For this generation writers, there are a lot of questions which were not articulated powerfully by the previous generation, like caste, religion, transgender, lesbian. These questions are also these questions are very prominently coming on the face of this generation writers. So understanding caste is not an easy task, and writing about caste discrimination among women, the upper caste, lower caste, Dalit, there is a lot of debates going on. And previous generation and now the generation who are writing as Dalit writers, Dalit women writers, are sometimes they are not in talking terms also. So lot of understanding should happen between the generations to understand many questions, the religion, caste, and other questions.
I would also like to add to that, retelling of stories has kind of brought a paradigm shift in literature. Retelling of myths, not only myth stories, like I can talk about myself. Nobody knew about, out of Hindi literature, of course, knew about Machli Mari Hui. Now it has been translated and now it is, really getting a lot of attention. Same with, Soira Bai's poetry. People are talking about it, people are reading it. Such powerful poetry. She says that, if menstrual blood makes me impure, tell me who was not born of that blood. Things like that we are reading now more than it was actually written. I think we never read these stories and poetry before, but last 5 to 10 years, there's a paradigm shift, I would say, regarding, when we look at literature,
30 years back in Hindi literature, women writers wrote about menstrual blood.
Okay.
But now we are, retelling and rereading those texts,
You can be louder. Yeah, you are audible.
And I see on daily basis a lot of these kind of events, stories happening, and we note it down. But since, as I said, I'm not a writer, but people like me, we wants to bring these stories out in the world because those are from the grassroots, from the real lives. So what do you suggest? What is the medium where this can be, presented to the world, where this goes to the large number of people and masses who care for this? So, yeah.
We are ready to come and tell them the story.
Sorry, ma'am, I didn't listen.
This is working.
So I think one of the things is a profound lack of education at the grassroots level. So I'm sort of glad that you brought it up. And not just grassroots in the way we normally understand it, even in, sort of more educated circles, upper middle class circles where children are sent to school and so on. It doesn't mean that a regular good, so-called good school or college education actually teaches you to look at the world through a different lens, which is what I think all of us have been sort of talking about, right? So I think one of the ways, that strikes me as a writer, and I've tried it myself as an educator, is to not so much do this top-down thing of telling them stories or bringing these stories to them, but to get them to express themselves. There is so little space in our society at all levels for people to take themselves seriously and tell their stories, right? So I think if that can be the focus, rather than taking these stories to them, but then making them the creators of their stories, I think that's a very important shift in how then it would work better. I think then just sort of doing it in this very top-down way, like, I know it all and this is how it is and you listen to these stories. What are your stories? Turn that question around. Just a thought.
Thank you so much, our panelists, for their quick response. And now I think we are just going to sum up the session. A writer should have empathy, not only sympathy. मृणाली जी ने जो बात कही, लेखक का मौलिक गुण है समानुभूति. बहुत सुंदर बात कही आपने. हार्दिक आभार आदरणीय मृणालिनी जी एवं सभी विद्वान वक्ताओं का. आप सबके मूल्यवान विचारों ने इस गंभीर और ज्वलंत विषय पर बखूबी प्रकाश डाला और आपके वक्तव्यों ने प्रमाणित किया कि आप अपने अपने क्षेत्र में जेंडर इक्वालिटी को लेकर, अवेयरनेस को लेकर कितना महत्वपूर्ण काम कर रहे हैं. और निस्संदेह श्रोताओं के लिए भी ये एक समृद्धशाली सत्र रहा है. ये बिल्कुल पूरा विश्वास है हमें इस बात का. और पुनः आपका हार्दिक आभार, मैं पूरे मंच का आभार व्यक्त करती हूँ और आप श्रोताओं का भी विशेष धन्यवाद इस सभागार में अपनी उपस्थिति के लिए. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. अब हम दूसरे सत्र को समाप्त करके तीसरे सत्र की ओर बढ़ेंगे. थैंक यू सो मच.